All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Animation at the Oscars. This is something I've wanted to cover for a while. It combines two of my favorite things, animation and animation history, and the Oscars and Oscar history, which, again, I am one of those people where it's just some people have March Madness, some people have the Super Bowl, I have awards season. And actually, speaking of the Oscars, this was a very interesting awards season. This was one where it seemed like up until the last minute, there were a number of categories that seemed a little like, who's gonna win? Everyone knew Jessie Buckley was winning Best Actress, but even up to the end, people were like, I don't know, one battle after another is not the lock I think it is. Sinners might take Best Picture. Michael B. Jordan winning Best Actor was certainly not as much of a surprise after the SAG Awards, but a marked difference from earlier in the season when it seemed to be just Timothy Chalamet's coronation. Um, Again, I like that. The year before too, it looked like it was up in the air for Best Picture, and then Anor started winning all of the Guild Awards, and we're like, oh, well, I guess this is happening. So, I always love a fun, unpredictable award season. It's never as interesting when by the time you get to that night, you know who's gonna win. Also, I'm going to say this, Amy Madigan winning Best Supporting Actress, our generation's Ruth Gordon and Rosemary's Baby moment. I was so excited. Also, Amy Madigan is awesome, and let's never forget, she was one of the people who refused to clap and stand for Elia Kazan when he got an honorary Oscar. So, we support people who don't like snitches. All right, but let's get started. Yep. The one downside of trying, where is this? One sec. All right, animation at the Oscars. So, one of my favorite topics, I love animation. I've grown up loving animation, even though being a younger child in the early 90s, animation was not necessarily great. We had Don Bluth and thankfully the Disney Renaissance, but that was it. However, by the time I got into my teenage years, animation in the United States was starting to get a little bit more varied, and we were also in the late 90s, early aughts, kind of experiencing the second wave of Japanese animation coming into the United States. So, time I was a teen, it was kind of a good time to like some cartoons. So, one of the things I hear, or I think I should say, a notion a lot of people have is when it comes to animation at the Oscars, it is oh, they don't care about animation. They see it as beneath nominating. It never gets awards. And I wouldn't necessarily say they don't value animation on the same way as they do live action features. I think there is some truth to that. But the idea of the Academy not respecting animation is one that just doesn't really seem true when you look at the actual facts. So, if I were to ask you how old you think the best animated short category is, Todd, just off the top of your head, when do you think there was the first category for best animated short?
I don't know why for some of my brain's going back to the 30s, but I could be wrong.
You're correct.
Huh.
So, the best animation being honored at the Academy Awards is almost as old as the Academy Awards themselves. And this is for a number of reasons. Number one, when the Academy Awards came about in the late 1920s, full-length animated features weren't being made in the United States. And there have been foreign language films nominated, but for the most part, to paraphrase Bong Joon-ho, the Academy Awards is still a fairly American award show. So, until Snow White comes along, America does not have a full-length animated feature. But animated shorts had been around for over a decade at that point. So, they had an animated short category. And the first winner is It is a Walt Disney feature. If you were to go to Wikipedia and just look at the winners, you are going to see Looney Tunes, you're going to see Tom and Jerry, you're going to see Woody Woodpecker, and you're going to see Disney throughout those winners and those nominees. But the first one is Flowers and Trees, which it's kind of interesting when you look at this in 1932 and I look at it, I almost see kind of the early stages of what could potentially become Fantasia. Um, a film that I kind of wish had, it's like, oh, I wish that the Academy did take it a little more seriously at the time. But yeah, at the fifth annual Academy Award ceremony in 1932, Flowers and Trees wins the Academy Award for Best Animated Short. So through the years, there is at least animation being recognized, only it's in short form. However, and I mentioned Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Snow White does get a shout out at the Oscars when it comes out. I mean, technically 1937, but at the 1938, in 1938, when the ceremonies are held, I'm just going to get this out of the way. When you see the year, I'm referring to the year the film is released, not the year of the ceremony. Um, it's just going to be easier for everyone to keep that straight. So, 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs changes animation history in the United States. There had been full-length animated features made prior to that in other countries, but if you want to look at the animation landscape in the United States, it does not exist, or at least not, it wouldn't exist the way we know it now without Walt Disney and Snow White. It's the first feature-length film. It was a hit for the time, but it also got a nomination for score. And now keep this in mind. What the kind of the other ways animation can get recognized without there being a Best Animated Feature category. And Walt Disney gets an honorary Oscar for Snow White, just basically recognizing this film as an achievement and also a success. This is 1937. Things aren't going too great. And this is a movie that charmed audiences, and it also just showed, hey, we can take these shorts that we're making and we can make them full length. And not only can it be done, but people will see them. Which is actually interesting if you know the history of Disney going forward. Not all of their films were hits. Fantasia was, I think, a modest success, but nowhere near what Snow White was. Same with Pinocchio. There was a lot of trial and error trying to figure out how to replicate Snow White's success. So, all right, we've kind of jossed the idea of the Academy is loath to award animation and doesn't really think it's worth honoring because we're like, okay, they've technically been nominating it since the 1930s and they gave a special award to Walt Disney in 1938. So, why did we not have a Best Animated Feature category? Why did it take so long for it to happen? We didn't have it until this century. And this is from The Emperor's New Groove, a great little movie if you've never seen it. So, long story short, there were not enough movies made. Um, and in many cases, there wasn't any competition. Disney wasn't the only game in town in terms of animation, but it was the only animation studio that made films that the Academy would probably even consider. And Disney's output was not the way it is now, where they're cranking out two, sometimes three movies a year. Back in the old day, or just with animation in general, animation took longer. There were years gaps between each animated film. So there could be years where it's just there's no animated features coming out. We're just not going to have this category. So they just figured, let's not have one. This got in pretty much that question was put to bed and not even addressed until the early 90s with the Disney Renaissance. And that's when people started to go, there should be a Best Animated Feature category. There should be something. Disney's like really between The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. We should have something. But the question, once again, it becomes, but what else is there? There's just Disney. Don Bluth makes movies, and he had a good streak in 1980, but come the 1990s, the man couldn't keep a studio running. And I'm sorry, I don't think films like Akira and Ghost in the Shell are getting nominated by the Academy in the 1980s and 90s. And even Hayao Miyazaki's works, they hadn't come over yet, mainly because I think the only one that did was My Neighbor Totoro, and even that was reluctantly because in the 1980s, there was a cut of Nausicaa Valley of the Wind that was butchered when it came over here, and Hayao Miyazaki was so angry he almost didn't work with an American distributor again. So, thankfully, the people who handled Totoro handled it correctly. But yeah, I mean, why make an award if you just know who's going to be nominated every single year? It's like if only Disney and only Paramount put out movies every year. Hey, wait a minute, that might happen. But yeah, I can see from an Academy standpoint where you're like, we're not going to create an award if there's only one, if only one studio is making films. So how else could an animated film get nominated or potentially even win at the Oscars? So I have two words here, music and sound. Again, Snow White comes out. It doesn't get nominated for Best Picture, but it does get nominated for Best Score. And if you go back to look at music and score, and in some cases sound editing, you're going to see a lot of Disney films on there. So this idea of the Academy kind of relegates animation either completely to the side or doesn't consider them for other awards, again, not proven true by the actual track record. If anything, we will get to this later. That was a concern when the Best Animated Feature came about. But we have animators like Walter Lanz getting an honorary Oscar. Who Framed Roger Rabbit had a special achievement Oscar, and actually won a number of other awards. Film editing, sound effects editing, visual effects. Sound effects editing does not exist as a category anymore. Sound effects editing, sound mixing, that's all just been merged into sound. Um, Interestingly enough, though, based on the qualifications for best, what you need to qualify for best animated feature, Roger Rabbit probably would not qualify, despite being a very groundbreaking film and often considered an animated movie. Also, we have John Lasseter when he created Toy Story, which was another incredibly groundbreaking movie. It was Pixar's first film. He got a special achievement award. So the Oscars had animation on their radar. It was just lack of output, and also in many cases not a good output. Todd, would you like to explain a little bit of what the state of animation was like in something like the 60s, 70s, and 80s? Pretty 70s especially being a very low point for the Disney studio.
As I say, so one of the things that I know we've discussed in the past, Don Bluth did for Disney was he gave them a bit of a kick in the rear by actually giving them competition because around the time he started working for the studio, they were flagging in a big way. Like early 80s, Disney was trying to desperately reinvent its brand. That was what led to the ill-fated experiment trying to go darker with stuff like the Black Cauldron, the Black Hole, and it audiences weren't biting. It just was
Yeah,
not.
and Walt Disney himself had passed away over a decade ago, and the films that had come out since then just couldn't really recapture that magic. So again, I like in the 19 like 70s and 80s there would almost be no need for the category, but even then the stuff that came out it probably wouldn't be considered even worthy of a nomination. But we get into the 80s and especially into the 90s, the Academy starts paying attention to animation again. Nightmare Before Christmas nominated for Best Visual Effects in 1993, and I had a moment of how did it not win? And then I saw 1993 and I'm like, well, sorry, Steven Spielberg and
Yep.
Industrial Lights and Magic brought dinosaurs to life in Jurassic Park. So, the nomination is your win, Henry Selick.
Stop
And
motion, always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
oh, we'll get there. We'll get there. Justice for Laika, we'll get there. And one of my favorite little Oscar first, South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, 1999, their song Blame Canada is nominated for Best Song. and is performed live by Robin Williams. That clip is up online. It is on YouTube. If you have never seen that performed, it's great. No disrespect to Phil Collins. His song for Tarzan is good. Uh, Blame Canada should have won that year. And also Robin Williams, the man can never not perform well. However, everything changes in 1991 when Beauty and the Beast, an animated film, part of the Disney Renaissance, I would argue potentially the best movie the Disney studio has ever made, is nominated for Best Picture. And keep in mind, if you're a longtime Oscar viewer, you know we didn't always have the expanded category for Best Picture. That is a new invention. It used to be 5 films, 5 movies, and you all battled it out. So The Little Mermaid came out 2 years prior, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's it. Disney's back. Because before they'd had The Great Mouse Detective, which were like, this is good. Okay, is Disney back? Oliver and Company, again, like, this is good. This is charming. They got Billy Joel to do the music. They've got some actual voice, like, stars doing voice work. And then The Little Mermaid comes out, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, the magic is here again. And then Beauty and the Beast comes out, and it is, for 1991, one of the best reviewed movies of the year. And The Hollywood Reporter did a really good oral history on the creation of this film and the marketing of it. They wanted this to get an Academy Award. They're like, they had the same thing, like, this might be the best thing we've ever made. Let's get this ready for show for the fall. They actually had a not quite ready print that they showed at the New York Film Festival that fall. And the people who went were like, there are grown adults crying watching this film. So the idea of like even the Disney people were blindsided by it being nominated, that's not true. This was a hand they wanted to play. They're like, we believe we can do this. Um, so it's definitely a bit shocking for a lot of people, but it's not shocking for the industry, and it's not shocking for a lot of the producers and the directors and the general film audience. They're all like, this movie's amazing. It's beautiful. Disney is stepping up their game in animation. It's also telling a beautiful story that everyone enjoys. The people who had a problem with it were actors. And there was some snarky comments from people like Shirley MacLaine and Sally Field who were like, well, Sally Field said, we at the there's no actors in this movie. We at the Screen Actors Guild hope this doesn't become a trend. Granted, she said this when she was presenting. If you watch the Oscars, they all do a little kind of a little quick blurb of movies that are nominated and why. Sally Field got Beauty and the Beast. She said that, and I love Sally Field, but Sally, number one, animators, that's a lot of work, but someone has to voice these characters. And voice acting is a job. You are not just speaking into a microphone. You have to create a character similar to any live action actor doing so. If anything, Beauty and the Beast had live action actors in there. There's a very funny story from that Hollywood Reporter piece where Jesse Corti, who voices Gaston's right hand man, he was at the ceremony, he heard that, and he was, quote, cussing up a storm saying, how dare they disrespect Angela Lansbury like that? Which, yes, Angela Lansbury voices Mrs. The Teapot in this movie. Are you going to tell me Angela Lansbury is not an actor? So that's where a lot of the shock and some snarkiness and disrespect came from. But if you were to ask actual directors, a lot of them were like, no, I think it's perfectly reasonable it's here. They did not think less of the film. So, unfortunately, well, kind of, it lost Best Picture. Silence of the Lambs was the juggernaut that year. I don't think anything was beating it. However, had Silence of the Lambs not come out that year, I think there's a good case Beauty and the Beast could have won. I think its only real other big competition would have been Thelma and Louise. But it does win Best Original Score. It wins Best Song for Beauty and the Beast. I have a minor bone to pick with that. Be Our Guest was also nominated. I think Be Our Guest should have won. What can I say? I'm a sucker for a good crowd song. And it had 2 other song nominations. There's actually, at some point, the Academy did put in a rule of only 2 songs for one movie can be nominated. We can't have 3. I think it was the film Enchanted that finally made them make that rule. They're like, it can't be a majority one movie taking it up. And had a nomination for sound. And as of this year, it's still the only one of three animated movies to be nominated. There was Up in 2009 and Toy Story 3 in 2010. But again, this is still the only one that made it into the five. And I still think that is a really big feat, and there's a reason it's considered to be a game-changing moment. And it's the first time they start to have a real conversation about should there be a best animated feature until everyone goes, yeah, but it's just Disney. We're just going to avoid award Disney every year. However, two other movies come along in the mid to late 90s that start to show there's competition for Disney. The first is Toy Story, which is Pixar, and now Pixar is back under the Disney umbrella. But Toy Story was big. It was groundbreaking because it was this now computer CG animation that we is so ever present in our culture. This was the first of its kind. And it got a different type of nomination that um an animated feature had not gotten before, which was screenplay. Best original screenplay nomination for Toy Story. Didn't win that year. But the very fact that it was nominated, I think that could be or should be seen as potentially almost as groundbreaking of a nomination as Beauty and the Beast being up for Best Picture. An animated film getting screenplay is, I think, very. I don't think people. I think people gloss over how monumental that was. But the other nomination slash win here is the one where I think this was truly when people started to talk about, okay, we can do Best Animated Feature. It will be a competition. So, DreamWorks uh, founded by Jeffrey, is it Katzenberg? I can never say his name right.
Yeah, I want to say it's Katzenberg.
Katzenberg. He has a falling out with Disney and leaves and is very upset with it. And we'll get to a movie where you can feel his hatred coming off for Disney coming off the screen later. Starts DreamWorks Animation, that's also part of Steven Spielberg as well. He has a hand in it. Two movies come out that year from DreamWorks. The first is A Bug's Life, which interestingly enough, or no, it's Ants, which is a dueling movie with Pixar's A Bug's Life. They both came out in 98. Ants is kind of ruined now because Woody Allen voices the main character, and you all know how I feel, and I think a lot of people feel about Woody Allen. But the other film that came out was The Prince of Egypt, which is a fantastic film, a beautiful movie, and that wins Best Original Song. So in the early 90s, if a Disney movie was nominated for Best Original Song, everyone else go home, Disney's winning. That means you, Diane Warren. However, 1998, Prince of Egypt's When You Believe is nominated for Best Original Song and wins. Mulan, which had come out that year, wasn't even nominated. And I think this is just maybe headcanon is the best way to put it, or a more somewhat professional way would be my hunch. I think there were a lot of people in the industry, animation and otherwise, who saw Prince of Egypt and were like, oh boy, DreamWorks, we might have competition for Disney. Let's see where this goes. And in the at the end of the 90s, we did start to see other studios producing animated features. The year before, there was 20th Century Fox gave us Don Bluth's Anastasia. Proper pronunciation is Anastasia. In 1999, we had South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. We also had from Warner Brothers the beautiful, beautiful Iron Giant. And in the year 2000, we had Fox Animation Studios, which kind of went belly up after that, but we had Titan AE. And Nickelodeon was also making animated movies. Mainly, they had just made the Rugrats films, but there were starting to be other production companies popping up, and they were starting to stick around. And then in 2001, the cultural force that is Shrek, still around to this day, comes out. I feel like Shrek is now unfairly maligned on the internet. Um, there's a lot of people think it's overrated or it's not that funny. I'm going to disagree on not that funny. I think Shrek's hilarious. But I think some of the people who say it's overrated, I think they're looking at the lesser sequels and they're not looking at this movie in context and how much of a cultural force this was when it came out. It was a full-blown phenomenon. But the story of Shrek is one of you would not think this movie would essentially have the Academy create a whole new category. Shrek was a book that came out in like 1990. It was a children's book, 1989, 1990. Spielberg buys the rights back in 1991. And they had been working on it for almost a decade. And they'd gone to the point where they had done animation and they'd even recorded a voice cast. Very famously, Chris Farley was the first Shrek and then he passed away. They had to scrap everything he recorded. And also the animation department was like, "Oh my gosh, we're trying to do this Toy Story CG animation," and it was rough. This was considered to be the punishment. So if you were working on Prince of Egypt and you ticked off somebody and you had to go work on Shrek, they're like, "Oh boy, have fun in the dungeon." So this movie seemed like a disaster, and even I remember being a teenager when the poster started to hit up at the multiplex, and we're like, "What the heck is this? This guy looks like a green booger." And then the movie comes out, it premieres at Cannes, and critics and audiences love it. This movie made $484 million in 2001, so keep that in mind, on a $60 million budget. And it was, again, once again, like Beauty and the Beast, this was a movie where it seemed like it crossed generational lines. Everyone loved it. My parents love this movie. Kids like this movie. They like different parts of it. There's certain jokes that go over the kids' heads, but let me tell you, that applies to Disney movies as well. But this movie was such a phenomenon. They basically, it was kind of like the American Werewolf in London, the Werewolf transformation scene with Rick Baker. At some point, you've got to award something. But this also coincided with the fact that they had seen, they're like, okay, this isn't just going to be the Disney Award now. It might at the very least be Disney versus Pixar every year with maybe a third contender. So Academy voters see this as not only do we need to award this film, let's create this category because there will be enough movies to fight for contention. So, before we go further, what makes a movie eligible? Well, it has to be at least 40 minutes long, with 75% of the film being animated. That is why I said I am not sure Who Framed Roger Rabbit would qualify. Todd, uh, do you think it would qualify? I feel like it would fall short. I
That's
feel
one,
like it's a
especially
60-40 split.
it's one where the math on that gets really hairy, especially 'cause, like, again, it's not like parts of the movie live action, parts anime, where it's a clear cut line. It's we have animated characters cutting around the live action scenes, and that's where it's get. I can see the Academy getting really nitty gritty with the math on that.
Oh yeah, and there's even there motion cap again, we see here motion capture is not an animation technique. So while there are some there's a lot of people that feel the motion capture aspect of The Adventures of Tintin might have kept it from getting nominated, which is a shame because I thought that movie was great, but there are just some movies where it's like, okay, you might not make the cut versus so other qualifier, sorry. It has to have been shown in theaters within a year of eligibility for at least 1 week. So let's say it's a film in Japan that was released in Japan in the year 2016. Now, the main release for the film is actually 2017. That's where the most people get to see it. However, if they want to make a qualifying run, you can go to LA and you can show it for a week. It has to be shown at the same theater at least 3 times a day. And so, for a lot of the foreign language contenders, if they get acquired by a bigger studio or if they want to try for it, they will do that a lot. They'll do New York and LA to try to qualify. Um, and again, it has to be New York City, it has to be Los Angeles, Atlanta, the Bay Area, Chicago, or the Dallas area. So it can't be a middle of the no, it can't be it showed for a week 3 times a day at the Red River Theater in Concord. I love that place, but that would not count to the Academy. It has to be either on film or digital. And this is interesting. If it's eligible for Best International Feature, it can be submitted for animated. And that's happened a few times. Last year, we had the film Flow from Latvia actually competed for International Feature and for animated. And a few years earlier, there was a film called Flee FLEE, which competed not just for international feature and animated, but also best documentary. So what's ineligible? A multi-part ongoing or limited series, so you can't take a couple of episodes from a Netflix show, package it as a movie and go, here we go. They're like, nope, not eligible. Episodes extracted from a larger series. Again, that's not going to be eligible. And this is a little interesting because from a lot of anime fans, there's been accusations of bias against the Academy because there's movies like Chainsaw Man, Demon Slayer, Slam Dunk, where they are not episodes repackaged as a movie, but what they are is they're part of a larger series. And while it may not outright disqualify them, a lot of Academy voters are like, wait, I've got to watch four 26 episode seasons to understand this movie. I'm not watching that. Also, segments taken from a single composite program. So back in the day, whenever there were the repackaged Looney Tunes shorts that were put into like a 75-minute movie, that would not be eligible. And alternate versions of ineligible work. So if yours got rejected once and you tried to rework it, sorry, it is not going to be eligible again. So yeah, the multi-part ongoing and limited series and episodes extracted from a larger series, I feel like that is what kind of bites a lot of anime films in the tuchus, especially because number one, it is kind of getting very close to that line, but number two, as Todd, you've so aptly put it, the Academy doesn't like doing a ton of homework.
Yeah.
I mean, just this year, they had to implement a rule of that's it. If you're voting in the category, you have to watch all of the movies. Oh, Todd, we can't hear you.
Really? I'm unmuted.
Hello?
Yeah, still here.
Oh, yeah, I thought you said something. All right, moving on. So we're going to take a look at the winners. So take a look at 2001 for 2009. For the most part, there's only three movies nominated per year. It's not terrible. Again, there's enough for competition. I'm also going to note 2002, Spirited Away. I would say that is the best winner of this decade. It was actually one of the best movies of 2002, and as much as I love Martin Scorsese, I would have taken out Gangs of New York, swapped in Spirited Away. Um, in 2003, Pixar gets its first win with Finding Nemo, and then wins again with The Incredibles. Also, Todd, you did say stop motion is always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Not exactly. 2005, Wallace and Gromit, Aardman gets a win with Curse of the Were Rabbit, beating out another stop motion film, which is The Corpse Bride. Um, and I'm going to say this: Ratatouille is a very good movie, but I will never get over Persepolis not winning that year. I'm sorry, you're not going to tell me a little heartwarming movie about a cooking rat is better than a young woman's memoir about growing up during the fall of the Shah and the rise of the Islamic regime in Iran. Also, timely movie. You should watch it. Also, read the graphic novel. Um, but take a look at 2002 and 2009. These are the only years we had five nominations. Um, and again, it's pretty interesting. We have a couple of outliers again. Spirited Away, Japanese language win, the first anime film to win. We also have in 2003 The Trip to Belleville, a French language animated feature. And again, Persepolis, a French production made by an Iranian person. So we don't just have American movies in there. We have a couple of different ones. Wallace and Gromit is British while Howl's Moving Castle is nominated, but for the most part, it's still fairly American or at least fairly Anglo based. So, is there a Disney Pixar bias? Well, let's look back at these winners. We have DreamWorks, we have Studio Ghibli, although John Lasseter, who worked for Pixar, was a big booster for that film. Then we have Finding Nemo, Incredibles, Ratatouille, Wall-E, and Up. Five of those winners are like fall under the Disney Pixar umbrella. So I can definitely see where that accusation of bias comes in. And I mean, if you look at the evidence, Yeah, Pixar leads with 20 nominations. However, Disney is not the runner-up. That is DreamWorks, and Disney has 14 nominations. But however, Disney and Pixar are the leads for the wins. Only four for Disney, but 11 for Pixar. Studio Ghibli, DreamWorks, and Sony each have two wins. Sony just won their other one with K-pop Demon Hunters. And again, we have Aardman, we have Laika, we have Netflix, Cartoon Saloon, Nickelodeon, Blue Sky, Blue Sky, which doesn't exist anymore, and Wes Anderson. Both of his animated movies have been nominated. So the idea that people have of the animated category only nominates Disney and Pixar, that does not really ring true when you look at the nominees. If we're talking about who they award, I think that's where we have a bigger argument. Again, as I just said, I'm not sure how you can watch both Ratatouille and Persepolis and say Ratatouille is the better film. And there's also been, when they do the anonymous ballots every year, there would be someone going like, "Oh, I didn't watch all the animated movies, but my kid loved this Pixar film, so I'm voting for that." Also need to keep in mind, as I said earlier, the Oscars are a fairly American or Amerocentric award show. Bong Joon-ho called them out years ago, and they've been trying to change it, but still, it's for America, and it's also a producers award show. So if you want a film to not just win an Oscar, get nominated in the first place, you've got a campaign, which takes money, which takes time. You want to know who has a lot of time and money? Disney does, Pixar does, DreamWorks does. So if you want to even get these movies in front of people to see, you're going to have to do some legwork. A really interesting case of this was from the 2016 animated anime film Your Name, directed by Shinkai. Um, this film was very popular in Japan, one of the highest grossing movies of all time. And the director of the film and the distributors even brought it over to the United States for the LA Film Festival where it won. It won like one of the big awards there, and they started doing the week-long get it out there to qualify. And Funimation got the rights for it. But what Funimation didn't do was do a lot of campaigning. Funimation figured the popular general audience love for this movie would translate into a nomination. And that's not the case. Also, another thing is Funimation doesn't have as much money as Disney, as Pixar, or even G-Kids. So that is how Your Name ended up off the nomination slate that year, was because it was like you didn't do the hard campaigning. And some of this is, especially for animation, you've got to really work to get people to watch the film. Um, but back to this Disney Pixar bias. My last note here, as of 2026, both Disney and Pixar have lost 4 years in a row. And I do wonder if that will continue, especially because one of the criticisms I've heard of the upcoming Toy Story 5 is why are they doing it again? They've already had two endings. So who knows? But yeah, um we had Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, we had Flow, we had K-pop Demon Hunters, and oh, why am I blanking on the other winner?
Boy and the Heron.
What?
The Boy
Oh,
and the
Boy and the
Heron.
Heron, Studio Ghibli. Yes. Todd, I feel like you're talking at us from below, from down in a well.
Really short, well, all things considered.
Well, I am, again, I'm not hearing you as well. All right. So now we're looking at, once we get into the second decade of the awards, it's starting to be a meteor category. So 2010, there's only three movies nominated, but once we get into 2011, it's five movies down the line. So, for again, I'm going to say another big what are we doing here? Brave winning over Paranorman. What are we doing? Why? Anywho, Celeste and Ernestine, which is a really nice 2D animated film. We have A Cat in Paris in 2011. Again, Rango wins in 2011. A lot of people were shocked that The Adventures of Tintin did not get nominated, and a lot of the industry gossip was because there was a lot of motion capture in that movie, and they're like, I don't know about that. I know the animation people get very iffy about that. There's also, you'll see Secret of the Kells. You saw Secret of the Kells earlier, Song of the Sea. That is a really, those are good Irish animated films that you should see if you had never heard of them. They're really good. And then 2015 to 2019. We have Inside Out, but start looking at some of the nominations. A Mona Lisa or Anomalisa, which is an animated film made strictly for adults. It is the first R-rated animated film to be nominated. We also have Boy in the World, which is a more experimental animated film. Um, 2016, we have My Life as a Zucchini, a stop motion animated film, partially written by Celine Sciamma. And we also have The Red Turtle. 2017, well, Coco won because, man. But Loving Vincent, which has a really interesting animation technique where you would have people and they almost paint over them. It's kind of like motion capture, but definitely uses a lot more actual animation. 2018, this is a really good underdog story. And for me, I look at this as I think this is where we started to see a lot of real change in the category. So, 2018, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is like an incredibly animated film, it beats out The Incredibles 2 and Wreck-It Ralph 2, Ralph Beats the Internet 2, a Pixar sequel and a Disney sequel to two very popular films. Granted, Into the Spider-Verse is Spider-Man, very popular character, but up until Oscar night, people were thinking, I don't know, given how the Academy votes, they're probably just going to vote for The Incredibles 2. So a lot of animation nerds like myself were very happy to see Into the Spider-Verse actually take it. And you see 2019, you see Laika's Missing Link, you see Klaus, which is a Netflix film about Santa, and you see I Lost My Body, which was another film made more for adults than children. In 2017, they changed voting for the category. So before that, it was mainly voters in the animation wing voting for the nominees to determine the five. 2017, they decided let's open it up to everybody. And there was some controversy about that because people thought, oh no, the nominees are going to get worse. It's going to be only the popular films. But if you look back at the nominees, most of the nominations were popular mainstream American films. And people in the animation wing, there's a lot of people who work in the industry in the United States, and it can get a little incestuous in a way. Versus if you open it up to everyone in the academy who might not work in animation but might love animation, you might get a different perspective in there. Also, it's worth noting that in 20 after the Oscars for 2018, there was a huge overhaul in the Academy voter base as well, which kind of leads to, as we'll get to it in the next couple slides, I think probably the past 5 or 6 years we've seen the best slate of animated nominees overall. So the other big bias, and I think this is the more the bias that I think there's definitely some meat on the bones to, or accusation is there a just for kids bias? So this image is from Guillermo del Toro when he won for his adaptation of Pinocchio for 2002. And he says, animation is cinema. It is not a genre for kids, it is a medium. So in animation, if go to a Cineplex and you see an animated movie, chances are it is a kids film. Which is odd because if you look at our television, we have no problem with animated shows being for adults. We just cannot seem to make that jump with animation, with a few exceptions. Um, but one of the biggest concerns was a lack of care for the category by the voters. So, as we said, if whenever the anonymous ballots came out, Entertainment Weekly publishes some, Hollywood Reporter does, you will hear people, if the animated category comes up, they'll go, oh, I didn't watch it, but my kid liked XYZ. So there were a lot of people who said, what is the point of having this category if the voters are not going to respect it and just vote for whatever their kid watches? Which I think is a very valid complaint. Which again, hi, just this year, the Academy said that's it. If you're voting for a category, you have to have watched all the films. Which, there have been some, the ballots this year, someone said, oh, I only watched 3 of the 5 films for animated feature. I'm abstaining. I liked all three, but I would rather have a smaller voting base that saw all five of the films. Um, but yes, people, I am not the first person to bring up Ratatouille beating Persepolis as a instance of bias. Again, you just go, whatever the kids like. And then in 2017, uh, for the year 2016, movies like Boss Baby and Ferdinand, who were not only not really liked by an audience, but also not really critically acclaimed, got nominated. People started to go, come on, what are we doing here? Um, but the past 4 years or so, we have had a really good slate, not just of winners, but of nominees. So Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, that is not a film made for children. The Flow, I would not say is a movie for kids. The Boy and the Heron, despite being directed by Hayao Miyazaki, who has made films for kids, is really a movie for adults. Um, so I think the best way to put this is in terms of the category. In terms of the category within the context of the Oscars, they are doing great. They're starting to really modernize. But if we're talking about the category in the context of the larger world of animation, they are just catching up. And this is a give and take. And I mean, every category has critiques. Whenever there's a costume drama, everyone just immediately goes, okay, the most ornate costumes are going to win best costuming. No one even cares about historical research that goes into other costumes. Or makeup, people say the makeup that's the most showy is the one that always wins. So it's not like the best animated feature category is the only one to have complaints about it. The other concern with the best animated feature category is people felt this is a way to relegate animation into its own category and ignore it for every other category. And I think there's something to that. We have seen, I believe it was Toy Story 3 did get an adapted screenplay nomination, but for a very long time it did kind of put it into just the animation ghetto. That's it, animated movies get nominated. We don't really look at much else for the categories. That is thankfully starting to change. Um, a few years ago, there was a wonderful documentary called Flea, which is animated. That got nominated not just for documentary, but for animated feature and international feature. We also had Flow win nominated for both international feature and animated. And then in the aughts, which I think was pretty groundbreaking nomination at the time, the animated film Waltz with Bashir did not get into the animated feature category, but it got into Best International Feature. So again, it's starting to modernize, but only within the context of the Academy itself. So these are the winners we've had from 2020 to the present, and I think we have had, or this is, I think, one of the best slates overall. So 2020, we have Soul, Onward, Over the Moon, the Shaun the Sheep movie, and Wolfwalkers. Um, a really good slate overall. And again, 2020 was unfortunately that got a lot of those movies got kneecapped thanks to COVID. 2021, we have Encanto winning. I still think Flea is the better film, but Encanto kind of became a cultural phenomenon that year, so I understand why it won. But you also have Mitchell's versus the Machines. You have Luca. Luca is a really cute movie, and Mitchell's and the Machines is really funny. That's a Lord and Miller film who just made uh, Project Hail Mary, and also Lord and Miller involved in producing the Spider-Verse films. 2022, we have Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. We have Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. We have Turning Red. We have The Sea Beast and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. So a good mix of movies, movies for adults, movies from outside of the United States, movies with different animation styles. Um, 2023, I would say maybe with the exception of well, an Elemental at least looks cool. I would argue the best movie, the best slate we have had in a long time. Boy and the Heron from Hayao Miyazaki. We have Elemental. We have Nimona, which is based on a really good graphic novel. Robot Dreams, which is a charming movie if you haven't seen it, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. The only reason Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse lost is because Hayao Miyazaki came out of retirement to make a film. So when they lost, they were all like, what are we going to be mad about? Losing to the greatest living animator? Oh no. Um, 2024, a really great underdog story. You have Inside Out 2, which was the highest grossing movie of that year. You also have The Wild Robot, a DreamWorks picture. Both of those lose to Flow, an independently animated movie made with open source software, a completely silent film about a cat just trying to survive a flood. Um, I don't think Flow would have been nominated 20 years ago, let alone win. So again, this is where I say, in the context of the Academy, this category is modernizing. And this year, I will say, I don't think this year was a super strong year for animated features. K-pop Demon Hunters, though, once again, this was a cultural phenomenon. The Academy knew it's got to win, and also the people who watched it for the most part really liked it. But also, hey, a movie that Sony made, which just gave it to Netflix because they weren't sure it was going to do well, not only became a big cultural hit of the year, it beat out Zootopia too. Again, we're starting to see underdogs win in this category, and this makes me happy. So, we're at the end. What is the future of this category? I think my big question is, will an animated movie get nominated for Best Picture again? It hasn't happened for 15 years since Toy Story 3. Um, I this is my just a complete layman's hunch. I think if Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out and sticks the landing and continues to push what it does animation-wise, I think it could have a shot at the 10. That is the only movie coming out that I think could potentially get into the 10. I maybe I'll be wrong, but all of the advanced stuff I've heard about Toy Story 5 is these characters are out of gas. It's time to end it. And again, will we see more animated movies in categories in general? I would like to think so. I'm very pleased with the fact that a couple of years ago, 2023, when Beyond the Spider-Verse came, no, Across the Spider-Verse came out, that movie was shortlisted for a number of categories, including visual effects and score. So the fact that they got shortlisted means there are people, voting members in the Academy, who are watching these movies and saying, okay, we need to pay attention to this. So there is a growing group of people who believe, let's just not relegate animated features to animated features. Let's bring them into the other categories as well. Also, I do think it's criminal that the Across the Spider-Verse soundtrack was not nominated for Best Score, especially when John Williams' completely forgettable score for Indiana Jones 5 was nominated. Also, kind of weird that they put in a new rule of you can't use music from existing movies to shut out Dune Part 2, but then it's like, but you just nominated John Williams. Oh, Todd, make it make sense, Todd. Make it make sense.
I'm as stumped as you are on this one.
Okay. Will we see more adult animation win? Again, I think we had a good 3 year streak with Guillermo del Toro, Boy and the Heron, which again, I think that is a film for adults. I don't think younger children will get it. And Flow, which again, I think was made more for older audiences. We had that win. I think anything is possible. At the very least, we're seeing, I mean, Memoir of a Snail was an R-rated film as well. So again, the Academy is starting to look at other movies beyond just whatever comes out for the kids. So I think that's a pretty safe nominations are a safe bet. Wins. I think we will eventually see another one because it's happened. I think they can. What does Leica have to do to get an Oscar? Oh my God. Paranorman's great. Coraline's great. Kubo and the Two Strings is amazing. Like, Missing Link is charming. Um, they have a new movie coming out this year. If the luster really is off the Toy Story story, then maybe this is the year Leica finally stops being the bridesmaid and becomes a bride. I say this as a big Leica fan. Again, I'm completely biased on this subject. And finally, there has been discussing about this. Will there ever be a category for voice acting performances? And this is one that um, kind of gets concerned with animation people as well. Because a lot of people are like, yeah, voice acting is hard work. They should be awarded. There are a lot of professional voice actors who've worked for years. Uh, Billy West, John DiMaggio are two very good examples. The whole cast of The Simpsons. If you go to an anime convention, you're gonna see a lot of voice actors there. However, the concern people have had is this is just going to become a big celebrity takes a voice acting role at hopes of getting an Oscar. Everyone's going to try to be Robin Williams in the Genie again. So that's something people are concerned about. I think eventually, if animation continues to be just a very big part of our culture and we start to take it more seriously, I could see a future where that happens. Although, I don't know, the Oscars are moving to YouTube. Who knows if they'll exist in a few years? Todd, what do you think about a voice actor category?
So when you first mentioned this, I was getting flashbacks to early 2000s when there's the similar discourse about Andy Serkis's performance in the Lord of the Rings movies, where there's a
Hmm.
question of is mocap eligible for a performance? And again, that question of is this something where yes, part of it's animated, but still there is an actor embodying this role.
Mm.
And then that kind of died on the vine after that. So it'd be interesting to kind of bring that back in the larger
Hmm.
voiceover sphere. And to anybody who says like anyone can do it, I challenge you to look up clips of Robert De Niro voice acting. It ain't pretty.
No, no, it's not. I think there'd probably be a lot more people in the Academy going, sure, let's have a voiceover performance category. I think they'll be a lot more open to that than they would motion capture. Motion capture, especially in the animation circles, a lot of not so positive opinions. Um, but this is where we are now. Our current reigning champion is K-pop Demon Hunters, which I'm also gonna say, like, I have no problem with that movie winning. A movie that's number one, focused on women. It's about young women. It appeals to young women, especially since, you know, Hollywood is still, despite the, kind of like, oh, I don't know, a movie that's not aimed at young, preferably white men, is that going to make money? It's like, yes, people want to see themselves on screen. And people kept singing all those songs. I think it's a perfectly good winner. My hope for this year is that Leica finally takes home the trophy. What more do they have to do? Their output is wonderful. And does anyone have any questions? Once again, if you have never seen the film Persepolis, I would highly, highly recommend it. It's a beautiful film, and again, a story that is, I think, very relevant for right now. Again, I tell people like I don't hate Disney. I just don't like how they dominated that category for about a decade. And whenever they lose, I'd be like, oh, good.
So I'm gonna make one other note going back to this question of bias. I do think it's interesting that the idea that not everyone's been who's been voting best animated has been watching all the entries was kind of an open secret for
Hmm.
years. And it seems like the one catalyst there was not the animated one. There was the secret ballots confirming there were people who were skipping Best Picture nominees.
Yeah. Well, there was also a big debacle for the 2024 awards where Amelia Perez got 10 nominations, and then people started watching Amelia Perez and wondered, how did this get nominated? The Oscars are ever changing, but this is something I'll remind people is like, keep in mind, this just became a rule. You have to watch every feature. If you vote in the category, so if you only watch 4 out of 5, you just don't vote. Um, but yeah, but still, there is that bias of if you're not even willing to seek out the films, you're just going to vote for whatever your kid liked. It's like that is a bias. And but yeah, the fact that it was an animated feature, they're not watching Best Picture nominees. I'm like, yeah, that is telling that there's still a lot of the constituency of the Academy that doesn't take that category as seriously, but they don't take a lot of technical categories seriously. We're not even 5 years out from them well, not the Academy itself, but the people who run the show saying maybe we should just cut all of the technical categories from the broadcast. And once again, all of the filmmakers were like, how dare you? Guillermo del Toro went up there and swore at people and said, don't you dare cut technicals. I love Guillermo del Toro. That man loves cinema so much. Um, but yeah, anybody else have any questions, or do you have a favorite animated feature winner?
Some of them look very interesting that I would like to watch them.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, no. Again, like
Definitely.
it was kind of interesting to look at all of the nominees and go, okay, this paints a bit different picture than I'd initially had, but
Yeah.
the first decade of that category, I would say, is a pretty rough one. And once we get into the late 2010s, I'm like, I think we're starting to see the category really reach more of a potential of like what it could nominate. I think the fact that a lot more foreign language features are just in smaller movies are just getting in here is good. It also helps that there are studios like Neon and A24 who are acquiring these movies who have enough of a war chest to kind of advertise for them and campaign for them. So they're getting in front of the eyes of voters versus in the earlier days of the category, it really was whatever big mainstream animated feature was out there. And Netflix, I have my issues with Netflix, but if they have an animated movie they think could at least get nominated, they will pull out the stops to campaign for it. That's the one thing I'll give them.
it,
But I would say again, if you've never watched the film Persepolis, it's a beautiful film, and go
mhm.
watch Paranorman. Paranorman is so good. As in, have you seen it?
No, but there's so many that are so, have so many messages that
Yeah.
you don't want to just bypass them and say they're just for kids. So sometimes the
Hmm.
kids miss the message.
Yeah.
Maybe they will
Oh,
later
yeah.
on, but
Okay. Well, and that's actually a very interesting point to bring up. The idea of, oh, it's just for kids, ergo it's
right,
not serious. There are
right.
movies that are made for, yeah, that are made for children that do tackle big issues.
Yeah,
I mean, Beauty and the Beast is a film
yeah.
not only about like, beauty comes from the inside, but it kind of deconstructs that idea of the Disney prince, this big
Mhm.
strapping man who's going to save the girl from a monster. He ends up leading a lynch mob to a castle.
Right.
And he is someone who thinks he's the hero, and it's like, no, you are the villain.
Hmm.
Watching that film as an adult, I'm like, oh, I did not catch a lot of this as a
Yeah.
kid.
And Elemental, my granddaughter's friend had their birthday party when
Hmm.
Elemental came out. And after I watched it, I thought, wow, these were 5-year-olds.
Hmm.
It's a pretty intense film with a
Hmm.
lot of interesting themes.
Actually,
Yeah, well, I tell people I'm like when they want to watch the movie Flow, I'm like, I be a little cautious watching that with very young children because it's animals in peril. But
Hmm.
there's also a message in there about and same with the wild robot about working together and collaboration, the idea of you're not going to survive anything if you're just by yourself.
Hmm.
Um, but the film Paranorman I especially love, not only as a New Englander, that's a movie that gets New England really right, like towny New England. I'm like, oof, I feel called out.
Yeah.
But it also it looks at the issue of like outcast kids and bullying from a very different light and kind of ties it back to a darker period of American history, namely witch trials
Wow.
and what would happen to a child who might have seemed a little off back then.
Mm.
Yeah, it is a film that I'm kind of like when Brave won, not that Brave's a bad movie, but I'm like, did you even watch the nominees? How dare? But I mean, it's the Oscars. Every year, someone's going to be mad about what wins and what loses. I mean,
Hmm.
unless there's a universally beloved winner or a universally reviled one like Crash. Like, Crash won and everyone was immediately mad. It was hilarious. I wish Twitter
just
had existed at
recently,
that point. What?
just recently, it didn't really win. God, you could feel people wanting Amelia Perez to lose.
Yeah, I don't care what wins. I want her to lose. There's also the weird backlash that the Oscars have of everyone will love a movie and then it wins an Oscar, and all of a sudden online you'll just see everyone flip on it. And I'm like, I thought we loved Everything Everywhere
Right.
All at Once a month ago. What happened here?
Exactly.
I know. This is one where I'm like, on one hand, social media is fun. On the other hand, I'm like,
Right.
oh, maybe we should just all get off.
Yes, just think for yourself, make
Yeah.
your own decisions.
Exactly.
Thank you for
Um,
all those suggestions, though.
yeah,
That was
and I,
great.
I am, I'm sure if you've seen me in person, you know I love Ghibli and Miyazaki. But there are, uh, I do wish the Academy would consider some other movies from non-Ghibli creators.
This
The
is
only,
this is where
oh,
we
go
get to
on, Tom.
my what does it take? What's it gonna take for the Academy to finally acknowledge Masaki Yuasa?
Yeah, the only non-Japanese, a non-Ghibli Japanese film to ever be nominated is Mirai. But everything else, it's been Ghibli. But again, that gets back to the campaigning aspect. G Kids has the money to campaign, but they only have the money to campaign for really one movie. And so they're
Mhm.
probably just going to go, what's the easier one to get
Yeah.
a nomination and potentially win? And it's probably a Ghibli film.
Mhm.
Versus Disney can submit a
Yeah.
number of their
Right,
movies.
right.
So yeah, I tell people like it's not always as simple as bias. There's also money and campaigning and getting your eyeballs on a film as well. There's a lot of
Sure.
factors at play. All right, but yeah, it's about 7:45. I hope everyone joins us next month. We're going to be talking about The Book is Always Better, or is it? We're going to be looking at a couple of
Oh, yes.
cinematic adaptations of books and
Mhm.
go, you know what? There are a few where I'm gonna say it, the movie's better.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of them is Jaws. One of them is Jaws.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
Yep,
yeah.
that is one where I'm like, I read that book. Oh no,
Yeah.
this book is not good.
I didn't read the book, but I did see the movie.
Right.
Oh, Steven Spielberg really. I'm also gonna say this. I could make an argument for Jurassic Park being a better movie than a book. But
Oh
Mm-hmm.
that's
no,
more, I don't like how Michael Crichton writes.
the one thing I will give Crichton is because there's been a whole lot of discourse about the whole did Ham to cheat and everything, which the book makes more explicit.
Hmm.
But even that's a pretty minor thing in the larger scope.
Yeah, but we're going to be talking about sometimes there's adaptations that are on the par. We're also going to be talking about some downright terrible adaptations.
Mhm.
And since I just rewatched it, we are going to be talking about Terms of Endearment,
Mhm.
a movie I
Oh,
love. So, but that had a very Herculean task of condensing 30 years into 2 hours.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will see you all next month and have a good night.
Okay. Bye.
thank you,
Thank
Liz and
you.
Todd.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye,
See you.
Maureen. Bye bye.